Hey, my name is Ethan Cooper. I'm 24 and I live in apartment 3B of the Evergreen Pines complex, a low brick building on the edge of Seattle's suburbs. The place smells like damp pine needles in the morning and burnt coffee in the afternoon. I've been here 8 months long enough to know the creak in the third stair the way the lobby light flickers when it rains, and the fact that Mrs. Alvarez in 2C bakes banana bread every Sunday. My life is quiet. I like it that way. I work from home as a software engineer. Most days are spent staring at lines of code headphones on hoodie, up the glow of my monitor, the only light in the room. I order takeout from the same Thai place on Fridays, run the same 3-mile loop through the woods behind the complex on weekends, and nod politely at neighbors I barely know. That's the rhythm. Simple, predictable, safe. It was a Thursday in late October when everything started to shift. I was hauling a bag of groceries up the stairs, milk cereal the usual, when I heard the thud. Not loud, but heavy, like something big hitting the floor. I glanced down the hall and saw her. A woman I'd never seen before wrestling with a cardboard box the size of a mini fridge. The label on the side read, "Books, heavy as regrets in black marker." Her brown hair was pulled into a messy bun strand sticking to her forehead with sweat. She wore an oversized cream sweater and jean sleeves pushed up to her elbows. She looked frustrated but determined, the kind of person who doesn't ask for help until she's already tried everything else. I hesitated. My instinct was to keep walking, headphones and eyes down the usual city-suburb survival mode. But the box slipped again and she let out a small, exasperated laugh that sounded more tired than amused. Something about it made me stop. "Need a hand?" I called, setting my grocery bag on the floor. She looked up startled, then smiled, small but real. Her eyes were green, gray sharp but warm like a forest after rain. "You sure? This thing's a beast." I walked over, grabbed the other end of the box. It was heavier than it looked. "Where's it going, 3A?" she said, nodding toward the door across from mine. "Just moved in yesterday. We carried it inside." Her apartment was a mirror of mine, but felt different, warmer, lived in, even though it was half unpacked. Books were stacked in towers along the walls, a vanilla candle flickered on the kitchen counter, and a string of fairy lights hung loosely over the window. The air smelled like coffee and something sweet like sugar cookies cooling on a rack. We set the box down near a bookshelf. She wiped her hands on her jeans. "I'm Claire. Claire Monroe, Ethan Cooper," I said, brushing dust off my hoodie. "3B, right across the hall." "Thanks for the rescue," she said, her voice light but genuine. "I owe you one." I shrugged. "No big deal. Welcome to the building." That was it. A quick nod, a wave, and I was back in my apartment unpacking groceries, headphones on again. I didn't think much of it. Just a new neighbor, just a box of books. But that night around 9, there was a knock. Soft, polite, but deliberate. I opened the door, and there she was, Claire, holding a screwdriver like it was a foreign object. Her hair was down now, loose over her shoulders, and she wore a different sweater, dark green this time. "Hey, sorry to bother you," she said, a little sheepish. "The light in my kitchen keeps flickering. I think the bulb's loose, but I can't reach it. You wouldn't happen to have a step stool, would you?" I didn't, but I had a chair. "Give me a sec." I grabbed the screwdriver from my toolbox, followed her across the hall. Her kitchen was small, cozy, with a round table covered in sketch pads and colored pencils. The light in question was a single bulb in a glass fixture blinking like it was auditioning for a horror movie. I stood on the chair, tightened the bulb, and flipped the switch. Steady light. "Done," I said, stepping down. "You're a lifesaver," she said, smiling. "Want a beer or water? I've got both." "Water's fine," I said. I wasn't planning to stay, but she was already filling a glass from the fridge. We stood there for a minute, leaning against the counter, talking about nothing: her move from San Francisco, my job, the way the complex's heater makes a weird rattling sound at 2 a.m. She laughed when I mentioned the Thai place down the street, said she'd tried it, and ordered too much pad Thai. I left after 10 minutes. Back in my apartment, I told myself it was just neighborly. That's what you do, right? Help out, be polite. But the knocks kept coming. The next day, it was her washing machine. "It's making this awful grinding noise," she said, standing in her doorway with a laundry basket. I spent 20 minutes under the machine pulling out a rogue sock that had jammed the drum. She watched, leaning against the dryer, asking about my coding projects like she actually cared. I told her about a bug I'd been chasing for days. She listened, nodded, offered me a homemade oatmeal cookie when I was done. 2 days later, it was a window that wouldn't latch. I climbed onto a chair again, fixed the hinge while she held a flashlight and told me about a client who wanted a logo with 17 different fonts. We laughed. She made tea. I stayed longer than I meant to. Then it was her Wi-Fi. "It keeps dropping," she said, handing me her laptop. I reset the router, checked the cables. She sat cross-legged on the couch sketching something in a notebook, humming softly to music I couldn't hear. When it was fixed, she offered leftover lasagna. I said yes before I could think about it. After that, it was a potted plant that tipped over in her living room, spilling soil across the hardwood. I helped her repot it, my hands dirty. Her laugh filling the room as she told me about the time she tried to keep a succulent alive and failed spectacularly. She gave me a tiny cactus in a blue ceramic pot. "For your desk," she said. "It's low maintenance, like you." Each time I told myself it was nothing. Just favors. Just being a good neighbor. She was older, maybe late 30s, I guessed, and way out of my league in that effortless, confident way. Besides, she was just being friendly. Right, my coworker Jake didn't buy it. We were on a Zoom call debugging code when I mentioned the cactus. He grinned through the screen. "Dude, she's not asking you to fix her Wi-Fi. She's asking you to notice her." I laughed it off. "She's just new. Probably doesn't know anyone else." "Uh-huh," he said, smirking. "Keep telling yourself that." I did. For a while. By the end of the week, I knew the smell of her apartment vanilla coffee and something woodsy from the candles she burned. I knew she worked late sketching on her tablet with the stylus earbuds in. I knew she left her door unlocked when she was home, a habit that made me nervous, but she brushed off with a wave. I knew the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. But I still didn't get it. Not yet. One night I was microwaving leftover pizza when I caught my reflection in the window. Hoodie, messy hair, the cactus on my desk glowing under the monitor light. I thought about Claire's apartment across the hall, the fairy lights, the books, the way she looked at me when I fixed something like I was more than just the guy with the toolbox. I shook my head, turned off the microwave. Just a neighbor, I told myself. Just a neighbor. The next knock came on a Saturday evening, just as the sky outside turned that bruised purple color that means rain is coming. I was sprawled on the couch, laptop balanced on my knees, debugging a piece of code that refused to cooperate. The knock was soft but insistent, 3 taps, pause, 2 more. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Claire stood there in a loose gray sweater, sleeves pushed up, holding a French press like it was a peace offering. Her hair was damp from the drizzle outside, a few strands clinging to her cheek. "I made too much coffee," she said, lifting the press slightly. "Figured you might want to help me finish it before it gets cold." I hesitated. My screen was still glowing with error messages, but the smell of fresh brew was already sneaking into the hallway. "Yeah, sure," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." She shook her head. "My place. It's cozier. And I've got cookies." I grabbed my keys, slipped on shoes, and followed her across the hall. Her apartment felt different at night, warmer, the fairy lights strung along the window, casting soft gold pools on the hardwood. A vanilla candle flickered on the coffee table, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted beans and something sweet like browned butter. A record player in the corner spun lo-fi beats, the kind that make you feel like you're in a movie. She poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, one blue, one white, with a chipped handle, and handed me the blue. "Black, right? I noticed you never add sugar." I took the mug, surprised. "Yeah, how'd you fixed my Wi-Fi 3 times," she said, smiling over the rim of her cup. "I pay attention." We sat on her couch, a small space between us. The coffee was strong, smooth, better than anything I'd had in weeks. She curled her legs under her sweater, slipping off one shoulder. For a minute, we just drank in silence, the rain starting to tap against the window. "So," she said, "finally San Francisco. You ever been?" I shook my head. "Closest I got was a layover in Portland. Why'd you leave?" She leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, needed to slow down. The city was loud. Not just the traffic, the expectations. Everyone moving so fast, like if you paused for a second, you'd miss your life. She sipped her coffee. "Here, I can hear myself think." The rain helps. I nodded. I get that. My job's all deadlines and stand-ups. Sometimes I forget what day it is. She laughed softly. You're 24 and already burned out. 24 going on 40, I said, and she laughed again, the sound warm and unforced. We talked about small things that didn't feel small. She told me about a client who wanted a logo for a vegan butcher shop. Yes, that was a real thing. I told her about the bug that had been haunting my code base, a memory leak that only showed up on Tuesdays. She listened like it mattered, asking questions, nodding, her eyes crinkling when I described my boss's passive-aggressive Slack messages. At some point, she got up to refill our mugs. I noticed the way she moved, graceful but deliberate, like someone who'd learned to take up space without apologizing. When she came back, she handed me a plate of oatmeal cookies, still warm. Baked them this afternoon, she said. Stress baking. It's a problem. I took one. It was perfect, chewy, a little salty with a hint of cinnamon. These are dangerous, I said, mouth half full. Told you. The conversation drifted. She asked about my running route. I asked about her sketches. She showed me a digital painting on her tablet, a city skyline at dusk, all soft blues and golds. It's not finished, she said, almost apologetic. I keep tweaking it. It's good, I said. And I meant it. Later, she stood to hang a string of Edison bulbs along the wall above her bookshelf. The ladder wobbled and I jumped up to steady it. She handed me the lights, our fingers brushing for a second. I climbed up, looping the cord through the hooks she'd already screwed in. You're handy, she said, looking up at me. Comes with the territory, I said, focusing on the wire so I wouldn't focus on her face. You're the most high-maintenance neighbor I've ever had. She was quiet for a beat. I glanced down. She was smiling, but it was different, smaller, almost sad. I'll add it to my list of achievements, she said, her voice soft. I didn't know what to say to that. The moment hung there heavy, but not uncomfortable. I finished hanging the lights, climbed down, and stepped back. The bulbs glowed warm against the books, casting shadows that danced across her face. Looks good, I said. Yeah, she said, but she wasn't looking at the lights. I stayed longer than I meant to. We finished the coffee, ate too many cookies, and talked until the rain stopped, and the record skipped to silence. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Thanks for the coffee, I said. Thanks for the company, she said. I was halfway down the hall when I realized I'd left my phone on her couch. I turned back, knocked. She opened the door, phone in hand, a strange look on her face, like she'd been caught thinking something she shouldn't. Forget something, she asked, handing it over. Yeah, I said. Happens a lot lately. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Claire. Back in my apartment, I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. The cactus she'd given me sat on the windowsill, catching the glow from the streetlight. I replayed the evening, the coffee, the cookies, the way her voice softened when she talked about San Francisco. That joke I'd made about her being high maintenance. Her response. The way her eyes had drifted just for a second. I told myself it was nothing. Just a nice night. Just a neighbor. But I didn't sleep much. The knock stopped. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a morning without the usual tap-tap at my door, no muffled lo-fi drifting through the wall, no scent of vanilla sneaking under the gap. I told myself she was busy. Freelancers have deadlines, too. I kept to my routine code run Thai takeout. But by the third day, the hallway felt wrong, empty, like someone had turned down the volume on the whole floor. I caught myself listening for her. The creak of her door, the soft thud of her slippers, nothing. Even the fairy lights in her window stayed dark. I started checking my own Wi-Fi, half hoping it would drop so I'd have an excuse to knock. It didn't. On the fifth day, I was in the stairwell, earbuds in, when I heard a muffled sob. Quick cutoff, like someone swallowing it whole. I froze on the landing. It came from 3A. Claire's door was cracked open just an inch, a sliver of yellow light spilling out. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped. What would I say? Hey, I noticed you're not asking me to fix anything anymore. Everything okay? I'd sound like an idiot. Or worse, like I was keeping score. I went back upstairs, closed my door, turned the music up. That night, I couldn't focus. My code was a mess of errors, and every time I blinked, I saw her face in the kitchen light, the way her eyes had gone distant after my stupid joke. High maintenance? I'd meant it as a tease, the kind of thing you say when you're comfortable with someone. But maybe she'd heard something else. Maybe I'd hurt her without realizing. I opened my drawer, pulled out the cinnamon-scented candle she'd given me weeks ago. I hadn't lit it once. Too nice, I'd told myself. Now I set it on the desk, struck a match. The flame caught and the room filled with warm spice. I stared at the glow, replaying every moment. The washing machine, the window, the Wi-Fi, the plant, the coffee, the cookies, the lights. Jake's voice echoed in my head. She's not asking you to fix her Wi-Fi, she's asking you to notice her. I'd laughed it off, but now in the quiet it hit me like a slap. Every favor had been an excuse, a reason to talk, to stand close, to watch me laugh at her terrible puns, and I'd treated it like a chore chart. I was an idiot. The next morning I was in the elevator, hoodie up, coffee in hand, when the door slid open on the third floor. Claire stepped in, arms full of male hair in a loose braid. She looked tired, dark circles, no makeup, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from one bad night. Our eyes met. She gave a small, polite smile, the kind you give strangers. "Morning," I said, my voice cracking like a teenager. "Morning," she replied, eyes on the buttons. The silence stretched. I opened my mouth, closed it. The elevator dinged. Ground floor. She stepped out without looking back. I stood there, coffee going cold, feeling like I'd missed the last train out of a burning station. That afternoon I was in the lobby grabbing my mail when I saw her again. She was at the bulletin board pinning up a flyer for a local art fair. I took a breath, walked over. "Hey," I said. "About the other night?" "It's fine," she cut in, not turning around. Her voice was flat. "You were joking." "I overthought it." "No, I stopped." She finally looked at me and I saw it, the hurt banked but still glowing. "I didn't mean it like that. I say dumb stuff when I'm nervous." She raised an eyebrow. "You were nervous." "Yeah." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "Realize what?" she asked, folding her arms. I swallowed. "That you weren't asking me to fix things. You were asking me to stay." Her face softened just a fraction. She looked down at the flyer, then back at me. "Sometimes I feel like if I hung a sign on my door that said I like you, you'd still think I needed a light bulb changed." My heart stopped. "Why don't men ever get hints?" she added, half laughing, half sad. I stared at her. The lobby light buzzed overhead. Somewhere a door slammed, and in that moment, every knock, every cookie, every shared laugh clicked into place like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind to see. "I get it now," I said quietly. She didn't respond, just looked at me, waiting. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, the cinnamon candle burned low, the cactus casting a spiky shadow on the wall. I thought about her apartment, the way she'd hum while sketching, the way she'd lean against the counter when I fixed something, like she was memorizing the shape of my hands. I opened my fridge, stared at the leftover lasagna she'd given me weeks ago. I'd eaten it all. I opened my drawer, found the blue mug she'd lent me once and never asked for back. I set it on the counter. Then I did something I'd never done before. I brewed a pot of coffee, black, no sugar, the way I liked it. I poured it into the blue mug, let it cool just enough. I grabbed a Post-it, scribbled, "No more hints. Just coffee." I stuck it to the mug, walked across the hall and set it in front of 3A. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I went back to my apartment, closed the door, and stood there in the dark, heart hammering like I'd just run a mile. The next morning I opened my door to leave for my run. The mug was gone. No note. No sound from 3A. But the hallway smelled like coffee, fresh, warm, alive. I smiled. For the first time in days, the silence didn't feel empty. I stood outside 3A for a full minute before knocking. The hallway was quiet except for the low hum of the heater and the faint patter of rain against the windows. My palm was damp against the coffee mug I'd brought, black, no sugar, still warm from the pot. I'd rehearsed what I'd say a dozen times on the walkover, but every version sounded stupid in my head. I knocked. 3 soft taps. The door opened almost immediately. Claire was in a faded UW hoodie, hair loose, and a little messy, eyes wary but not cold. She looked like she hadn't slept much either. "Hi," I said, holding out the mug like an idiot. "If there's still a chance, I'd like to start over." As a neighbor who actually pays attention. She stared at the mug, then at me. A slow smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "I'm making tea," she said. "Come in." I stepped inside. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and rain-soaked pine from the open window. The fairy lights were on, casting soft gold over the books, and the half-finished sketch on her tablet. She took the mug, set it on the counter, and poured hot water into 2 cups. Chamomile. The steam curled between us. We sat on the couch, knees almost touching. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The silence wasn't awkward anymore, it was full. Like the space between notes in a song you'd already know by heart. "I was an idiot," I said finally. "You were," she agreed. But her tone was gentle. "I thought you needed fixing things. I didn't realize you were just giving me reasons to stay." She sipped her tea. "I'm not great at asking for what I want. Hints are easier, safer. I'm not great at reading them," I said. "But I'm learning." She laughed quiet real. "Good." That was the beginning. The next morning, I brewed 2 cups of coffee. I knocked once, left one outside her door with a post-it warning. When I came back from my run, the mug was gone and a warm blueberry muffin sat in its place wrapped in a paper towel. No note, just the faint scent of vanilla. The day after, I left a small tin of cookies I'd burned on the edges but tasted okay. She left a tiny succulent in a painted pot for your desk. It won't die if you forget to water it, like me. We fell into a rhythm. I'd bring coffee around 8. She'd leave baked goods or a doodle on a napkin, sometimes a cartoon of me wrestling with her washing machine speech bubble, hero of the day. I started timing my run so I'd pass her in the hallway. She'd be in paint-splattered overalls heading to the mailbox, and we'd talk about nothing, the way the rain smelled different in Seattle, the new Thai place that opened downtown, the fact that we both hated jazz but loved lo-fi. One night I knocked with a pizza box. I ordered too much, I lied. She raised an eyebrow but let me in. We ate on the floor backs against the couch watching an old movie neither of us cared about. She fell asleep halfway through, head on my shoulder. I didn't move until the credits rolled. Another evening she texted her first text ever. "Movie night, I have popcorn. I brought root beer." We watched a documentary about deep-sea creatures and argued over whether octopuses were smarter than dolphins. She won. I let her. The cactus on my desk bloomed one morning, a single pink flower, delicate and stubborn. I took a photo, sent it to her. She replied with a voice note, "Look at you plant, Dad." I saved it. We started cooking together, nothing fancy. She taught me how to make pasta from scratch. I taught her how to make the perfect grilled cheese. We burned garlic bread exactly once. She laughed so hard she cried, and I realized I'd do anything to hear that sound again. One Sunday, we walked to the farmer's market. She bought apples, I bought coffee beans. We carried the bags together, shoulders brushing the air crisp with wood smoke and fallen leaves. She bought a tiny jar of honey and handed it to me. "For your tea," she said. "You pretend you don't like sweet things, but I see you." I didn't deny it. Back at the complex, we sat on the stairs between our doors, sharing the honey on crackers. She asked, half joking, "So do you get the signals now?" I looked at her, really looked. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way she always left the porch light on for me, even when I didn't ask. "No more signals," I said. "You just have to say it." She leaned over, kissed my cheek soft, quick warm. "Consider it said." That night, I left a note under her door, "Dinner tomorrow, I'll cook." She replied with a single emoji, a tiny coffee cup, and I grinned like an idiot for the rest of the night. We weren't dating, not officially. We were neighbors, friends, 2 people who'd learned to read each other without words. But every morning the coffee appeared. Every evening the muffin or the doodle or the quiet knock. And every time I opened my door, the hallway didn't feel empty anymore. The knock came on a Friday night, just as the city lights started to flicker on below. I was at my desk, headphones off for once, the cactus flower long gone, but the plant still thriving. 3 soft taps. I opened the door and Claire stood there in a dark coat scarf loose around her neck, holding a bottle of red wine and a thin blanket. Roof, she said, a small smile playing at her lips. I've got something to show you. I grabbed my jacket, followed her up the stairwell to the access door. The rooftop was small gravel, crunching under our shoes, the air sharp with coming winter. She'd been up here before I could tell by the string lights she'd strung along the railing, glowing soft white against the dark. A folding chair sat in the corner, a half-empty mug of tea gone cold. She spread the blanket on the gravel, sat cross-legged, and patted the space beside her. I sat. She poured wine into 2 plastic cups, cheap, but the gesture made me smile. The city sprawled below us, a grid of gold and red, the Space Needle a distant spike of light. I used to come up here when I first moved in, she said, pulling the blanket over our knees. Just to breathe. San Francisco never felt this quiet. I took a sip of wine. It was good, smooth, a little smoky. You miss it sometimes. She leaned back on her hands, eyes on the sky, but not the noise, not the rush. When I transferred here, I told myself it was temporary. A pause. Then you started leaving coffee outside my door. I laughed under my breath. You started it, did I? She turned to me, eyes catching the light. I thought I was being subtle. You were terrible at subtle. She nudged my shoulder. You were worse at noticing. We sat in silence for a minute, the kind that didn't need filling. The wind tugged at the blanket. I shifted closer so it wouldn't slip. She handed me a piece of dark chocolate from her pocket, broke it in half. We ate it slowly, the bitterness lingering. I thought I'd stay a month, she said quietly. Maybe 2. Get my head straight. Then you helped me carry that stupid box of books, and suddenly this place didn't feel temporary anymore. I looked at her. The lights painted soft lines across her face, the scarf slipping to reveal the curve of her neck. You make it sound like I did something. You did. She set her cup down, turned to face me fully. You showed up. Every time I knocked, you opened the door. Not because you had to, because you wanted to. I swallowed. I didn't know what I was doing. You still don't, she said, smiling. But you're here. I reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold, but they curled around mine like they'd always belonged there. I'm glad you noticed me, she whispered. I leaned in. The kiss was soft, no rush, no fear, just the taste of wine and chocolate and the faint trace of vanilla on her skin. When we pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, breath warm in the cold air. We stayed like that until the wine was gone and the chocolate wrapper fluttered in the wind. She gathered the blanket, stood, offered me her hand. I took it. We left the lights on for the next person who needed a quiet place to breathe. The next morning, I opened my door to head out for a run. A fresh mug of coffee sat on the mat, steam curling in the chilly air. Beside it, a Post-it in her handwriting. Now you don't need hints anymore. I smiled, picked up the mug, and took a sip. It was perfect, black, no sugar, just the way I liked it. We never said I love you, not yet. We were still neighbors, still friends, still learning the shape of each other's days, but the knocks continued. The coffee appeared. The muffins, the doodles, the quiet evenings on the couch with lo-fi and burnt garlic bread. And every time I opened my door, the hallway smelled like vanilla and rain and something new. I finally learned that we don't need hints when we find someone worth noticing.